Power of two treaties, NATO, the Warsaw Pact, and the hidden thermodynamics of civilization epigraph. History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it. Winston Churchill said that. But you know what? History will not be kind to Yalta, because the people who got betrayed, they never stopped writing. Author Ben Shu. It was the best of treaties. It was the worst of treaties. It was the age of calm. It was the age of turmoil. It was the epoch of unity. It was the epoch of division. It was the season of strength. It was the season of fear. It was the spring of survival. It was the winter of annihilation. Preface. The unbalanced logic of power. In the corridors of human power, there's this logic that keeps showing up. It's predatory. It's simple. Take from the bottom, give to the top. The poor get poorer, the rich get richer, and the gap. The gap becomes a chasm. We call this the Matthew effect, and it's everywhere, this imbalance. It's the very heartbeat of history. Dynasties rise, dynasties fall, and the pattern is always the same. Understand the dynastic cycle. Imagine a game of Monopoly with a special rule. The player who goes first gets an extra $500 and the right to buy properties before anyone else even rolls the dice. This is the dealer advantage. In a fair game, the right to go first should rotate counterclockwise after each round. But here's what actually happens. The guy who went first, he wants to stay first forever. He uses his head start to buy a boardwalk in Park Place, build hotels, and collect rent from the other three players until they're dry. He's trying to transform a temporary rotation into a permanent monopoly of privilege. The other three players, realizing they're getting systematically drained, naturally form an alliance. They stop trading with the dealer. They refuse to land on his properties. Eventually, they flip the table. This is the dynastic cycle. The dealer tries to weld his seat to the floor, and the three players unite to drag him down. When the table is flipped, the game resets. New shuffle, new first player, and the cycle begins again. This is the tale of two treaties. Prologue, the thermodynamics of civilization. Every social system humanity has ever built is solving the same physical problem. Where does the heat go? Think of the two most common household appliances, the refrigerator and the air conditioner. On the surface, both are designed to cool things down, but their underlying logic points toward two completely different destinies for civilization. A refrigerator is a closed system. It pumps heat out of its cabinet and dumps it into the kitchen. The result, the colder the inside gets, the hotter the kitchen becomes. If the kitchen stays sealed, eventually either the fridge burns out or the whole room becomes a furnace. It cannot export the cost. It can only shuffle chaos from its left hand to its right. An air conditioner, however, has an outdoor unit. It imperiously vents its heat into the world outside. The tranquil years enjoyed indoors are bought and paid for by the roar of the machine outside. Section 1, the entropy trap and the meat grinder. This distinction is written in the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. When Rome expanded, it was exhaling, like the conquests of Trajan. It released internal pressure by pushing its borders outward, venting its heat just like an air conditioner. But when it stopped, when Hadrian built his walls, the empire began to inhale. It lost its outdoor unit. It retreated into itself, becoming a refrigerator system, doomed to consume its own interior until it burned out. For the last 500 years, the history of capitalism has been a search for the outdoor unit. Slut, whoever can successfully export their crisis, their chaos, and their poverty into distant colonies, can maintain elegance, civilization, and democracy at home. But when the heat builds up in the kitchen, some of the most sensitive minds choose to pull the plug. Think of the Waldensians in the 12th century Alps, rejecting the very concept of private property. Think of Henry David Thoreau in 1845, building his cabin at Walden Pond. Think of Robert Owen and his New Harmony commune. These were not just dreamers, they were censors. They felt the refrigerator dilemma. They realized that when a society can no longer expand, its rigid system of property rights turns into a meat grinder. Their utopian socialism was not an innovation. It was a stress response. It was panic. As Voltaire mocked in Candide, the utopias we dream of are often just illusions born from the peak of our own internal friction. Section 2, The Great Divide, Patent Law and the Oil Curse. Escaping the heat does not solve the problem. The buildup of entropy in Europe created a strange academic division of labor. Britain produced economists. Germany produced philosophers. Why? Because Britain had an outdoor unit. The Royal Navy vented Britain's heat into India and Africa. Britain produced the winner's manual, Thermodynamics. But Germany was a refrigerator, landlocked, fragmented. Its contradictions fermented within. Philosophy became the painkiller for the trapped.
The secret to the British victory was an institutional code, the Patent Act of 1624. The monopoly law. It was the land law of the mind. By granting a 14-year monopoly to inventors, Britain made innovation profitable. It allowed capital, like Matthew Boulton, to bet on mines, like James Watt. This 14-year window allowed the British to turn their coal into the power that mounted their outdoor units across the globe. Meanwhile, Germany was asleep. When Bismarck unified the nation, the colonies were gone. Germany excelled in the closed system, the internal combustion engine. The crankshaft converted reciprocating motion into perfect circular efficiency, but it carried a geological curse. God gave the Ruhr Valley coal, but not a single drop of oil. To survive, Germany tried to build the 3B railway, Berlin to Byzantium to Baghdad, a land-based outdoor unit, a dagger aimed at the heart of sea power. But that dagger was broken by a single shot in Sarajevo. Section 3, Uncle Marx and the British frustration. Then we come to Uncle Marx. Marx took the German philosophical head and grafted it onto the British economic body. He pointed out that the design of private property was fundamentally flawed. His work, Das Kapital, was the Young Germany Manifesto. He roared against the old empires that had monopolized all the outdoor unit slots. But the prophecy failed to arrive in Britain, in the world of law. We call this frustration. The British didn't need a new prophet, because they were people of the common law and the Calvinist spirit. They talked to God directly through the text of the Bible. No middleman required. The bizarre logic was decentralized. While British workers were bought off with colonial profits, the Second International was on the verge of a split, and it was here that the path began to fork. Section 4, The Fable of Bohemian Rhapsody, the Irish Home Rule Trap. If we turn the clock to 1975, Freddie Mercury was unknowingly singing the internal monologue of a Serbian youth 60 years prior.
The First World War ended in the Hall of Mirrors. The German Empire was born there in 1871 and strangled there in 1919. It was here that the concept of war reparations was invented. Kriegsentschädigung. That's the German term for war reparations. 132 billion gold marks. Why create a financial vacuum instead of the traditional execution of the loser? Because of the blood. European monarchs were bound by blood and marriage. The Kaiser, the king, the Tsar, they were cousins. A tightly knit dynastic network. A king does not execute a king. Members of the same tribe do not send each other to the gallows, because to do so would set a precedent that makes every king vulnerable. They let the Kaiser flee to Holland. They blamed the nation instead of the man. They created a cynical legal precedent. This is why, 30 years later, in the ruins of Tokyo, the Japanese emperor was shielded from the gallows. The dealer may lose the hand, but the dealer's person is sacred. This massive accountability gap turned the German Republic into a pressurized refrigerator, and in this thermodynamic crisis, the people used their democratic tools to find a release valve. Hitler was the logical physical response to a system that could no longer vent its heat. He promised to rip the door off the refrigerator and export the cost of survival. The German people used the ballot box to plug in the ultimate compressor. Section 6 tanked. The road fewer took. The Stockholm Syndrome of the state. There is a path that history often forgets. A path of evolutionary change known as the road fewer taken. The path of Eduard Bernstein. While other nations burned in the fire of revolution, Scandinavia built a high-tech laboratory of social democracy, but this experiment required specific physical conditions. First, it required uncontroversial hard assets, liquid commodities like high-grade iron ore, ancient forests of timber, and high-energy fish oils. These resources provided the liquid currency needed to fund the experiment without ever overheating.
Second, it required the logic of the small ship, a Viking longship where every man was an oarsman and no one could afford to be a parasite. Third, the population was tiny, easy to turn, easy to manage. In the world of software, this is the path of Linux: open source, shared, decentralized. It is the bizarre logic realized. Linux is the Nordic model of the digital world. But there is a dark side. The Stockholm Syndrome of the state. In this Scandinavian laboratory, the citizens have lived for so long in the safety of the gilded cage that they have begun to fall in love with their captor. The state is the robber. It takes the majority of your labor. It defines your choices. It manages your soul. And yet, the hostages have become so protective of this robber that they worry about his physical and mental health. They identify so deeply with the extraction that they have lost the ability to face the actual thermodynamics of the world outside. This is why we suddenly see figures like Greta Thunberg screaming, "How dare you!" It is the voice of a generation born inside a perfectly temperature-controlled cabinet. A child who has never felt the cold. A scream directed at the sun for being too hot, and at the wind for being too loud. They have forgotten that the air conditioner, however quiet, is still machine, and all machines eventually break. Section 7, Civilizational Jet Lag and the Sacred Ledger. The October Revolution happened in November. This was a civilizational jet lag. Russia lived on the old time of God, the Julian calendar, while the West used the time of the Sunday, the Gregorian calendar. This gap was not a mere mistake of mathematics. It was a war over time sovereignty. To the West, time was a secular tool, an instrument for industrial efficiency and railway schedules. To correct the orbit of the sun, they were willing to delete 13 days from the history of the world. Each boundary is not just administrative. It is a valve of value extraction. The pathology emerges from the central lie, undifferentiated human labor. Marx claimed that 1 hour of labor in Berlin equals 1 hour in Tashkent equals 1 hour in Warsaw. But this is not just wrong. It is a weapon of plunder disguised as theory. Here's how the extraction worked. The command. Moscow decrees that Kazakhstan must grow corn. It doesn't matter that Kazakhstan's economy was pastoral herding. It doesn't matter that the soil is wrong. The decree is absolute. You will grow corn. The coercion. To grow corn, you need tractors. Where do tractors come from? Moscow factories. How much do they cost? This is where the scam begins, the scam. Moscow calculates the tractor's value using undifferentiated human labor. 1 hour of a Moscow factory worker supposedly equals 1 hour of a Kazakh herder. But this is absurd. The Moscow worker operates advanced machinery in a heated factory. The Kazakh herder tends livestock on frozen steppe. Their labor is not equivalent in any physical sense. Yet the central planners force equivalence through decree. The result? Tiered pricing through phantom metrics at each shell of the matryoshka. The center extracts real resources, grain, meat, minerals, in exchange for overpriced industrial goods valued using the fiction of equal labor. That is not trade. It is institutional arbitrage masquerading as socialist brotherhood. Each border crossing within the Soviet system became a rent-seeking interface. Officials at every layer could skim value by controlling the flow of goods between shelves. The further from Moscow, the more exploitative the exchange ratio. The Warsaw Pact nations were not fraternal allies. They were the outermost victims of a nested extraction machine, an aesthetic of the exoskeleton, built by a power that never learned how to trust the open bazaar. Each layer added friction until the matryoshka was too heavy to dance and too rigid to breathe. Section 10, the cyber god that had to die. The Cold War was a battle over the definition of value, and NATO believed in exchange value. It is an air conditioner diesel venting inefficiencies through global trade, But the Warsaw Pact believed in the labor theory of value. They believed in a metric called undifferentiated human labor. In the world of philosophy, this is a beautiful dream. But in the real world, once you cross a border, this metric becomes a weapon of institutional arbitrage. To run a planned economy without market prices, you need distributed computation. In capitalism, every haggle between a shopkeeper and a customer is a calculation, a small adjustment that helps the economy find its equilibrium, like water seeking sea level across millions of tiny transactions. But in a command economy, there is no haggling. There is only the decree from above, to make this work fairly, to allocate resources without exploitation. You need centralized computational power far beyond what any market requires. You need a cyber god. In the 1960s, Soviet scientists almost built one. The Seton, a ternary computer using balanced ternary logic, -1, the ternary, and +1, instead of binary. It was elegant, efficient, and in theory, the perfect brain for central planning. If combined with the proposed OGAS National Automation Network, it could have calculated the real needs of 300 million people without the lies of undifferentiated labor. But here is the fatal problem. If a cyber god is powerful enough to fairly allocate resources, it exposes the fact that the bureaucracy is redundant. If a machine can calculate optimal grain distribution, why do we need 100,000 party officials? If an algorithm can set rational prices, what is the planning committee for Tautra? This is the Soviet enclosure movement, just as English landlords evicted peasants to make room for more profitable sheep. Sheep eat men. A truly efficient cyber god would evict the bureaucrats to make room for automation.
In an ideal state with no information entropy injected, meaning rules are absolutely effective and cost nothing, this system would be eternal. The Western world would forever remain in a low-entropy civilized state without worrying about decline. This is what they call the end of history, but in 1848, another voice issued a manifesto in London. A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. What is this specter? It is the group of molecules that refuse to be sorted by Maxwell's demon. The demon says you must run fast, have capital, have technology to go to the right side. The specter says, no, we want the stars in the sky to belong to everyone. You have, I have, we all have. The essence of communism is to resist that cold, intelligent, efficiency-based molecular sorting mechanism. The specter does not accept that fast molecules are nobler than slow molecule. It wants to smash the partition, kill the demon at the gate, and mix all the molecules together. It pursues a thermodynamic utopia. Whether you are fast or slow, everyone is in the same pot, same temperature, same fate.
This is not just about bread and milk distribution. This is a clash of cosmologies. The demon, NATO, capitalism, believes only through extreme differentiation and sorting can civilization reverse entropy. Spectre, the Warsaw Pact, communism, believes only by breaking all differentiation and boundaries can humanity achieve complete liberation. And so the entire 20th century became a giant laboratory. On one side was Maxwell's demon equipped with an air conditioner outdoor unit. NATO. They used technological hegemony and rules hegemony to frantically vent heat outward, trying to maintain that dream of time reversal and eternal youth. They believed the invisible hand, actually the demon, could regulate everything. On the other side was the communist specter trying to build a closed refrigerator, the Warsaw Pact. They tried to use the visible hand planned economy to replace the demon. The Soviet Planning Committee, Gosplan, essentially wanted to become that all-knowing demon, attempting to control the flow of every screw, every molecule.
But here is a fatal physics bug, Landauer's principle. Physicists later discovered that for Maxwell's demon to identify and remember, it must consume energy. Information entropy must be continuously injected. NATO's demon relied on plundering external resources, colonialism, dollar hegemony to pay for this energy. The Warsaw Pact's demon had no external energy input. It could only consume internal energy, even turning neighbors into enemies. Yet history's most ironic page is this. The planning committee that tried to control everything once had the chance to possess the perfect brain, but it personally removed its own frontal lobe. The bureaucracy faced a choice: adopt the perfect calculator and expose the lie, or preserve the lie and smash the calculator. They chose their desks, not because they were evil, but because a truly efficient cyber god would reveal what they had always known but never admitted: that no computer, no matter how powerful, can calculate the real needs of 300 million people without the price signals of a market.
And we see this ghost today, in the relentless push for artificial intelligence, even as employment crumbles. The dream of the cyber god never died. It merely migrated from Moscow to Silicon Valley. The question remained: can any system, capitalist or communist, achieve perfect efficiency without eventually rendering its own citizens obsolete? The tale of two treaties may have ended in 1991, but the thermodynamic crisis it revealed, the impossibility of a closed system sustaining order without exporting chaos, continues to haunt us. The next chapter of this story is still being written.